well, welcome back to another edition of the Contrarians. I'm not in the hot seat this time. This time we have Nick in the hot seat. And we are talking about a band called Metallica. Perhaps you've heard of them. They're actually pretty big. So essentially, on this show, of course, what we do is we talk about, we have to sincerely believe, the guy in the hot seat has to sincerely believe that an album that is a contrarian choice is the greatest album by a band. And here we're gonna argue with Nick. And yes, so we're talking Metallica, and I just wanted to show I do know my Metallica, so hopefully I'll have something to say. Smart with Nick here. Nick knows Metallica better than I do, but I've got these books, this Thrash trilogy. Hit the Lights, The Birth of Thrash, Tornado of Souls, Thrash's Titanic Clash, and actually the middle one is Cotton and Mosh, The Golden Era of Thrash. There's a lot of Metallica in here. And of course I did the Metallica Complete Illustrated History. I still have this one. This is the original hardcover for sale, and this is the updated soft cover. These are available at my site, martinpopoff.com. I sign them and sell them and ship them out. So there you go. I know this band. Nick knows this band, and let's ask him now, shall we? What is the greatest Metallica album of all time?
That would be ... and Justice for All.
Nice. I'm glad you put the dots in there properly, and I
important.
hope you can spell it right when you write it and stuff, because it's a complicated one. It drives me crazy, but okay.
Yes.
So why? What's so great about it?
Well, you mentioned complicated, and complicated is a good word to describe Injustice for All. I think in the past, I've talked about the difference between sometimes enjoying something as just a piece of, like a product, music, easy listening, and some things are art. And to me, Metallica usually falls somewhere in the middle, and this, along with maybe Master of Puppets, but really this is the album where they pushed it, where they just went full prog, and they're great at it. They're amazing at it. They have classical compositions juxtaposed with some of their heaviest stuff. You will not find heavier songs on Puppets. You won't find heavier songs on, well, maybe Ride the Lightning might have one or two songs that are on that same level of just pure aggression. But I would challenge you to find a Metallica song that's, heavier than the heaviest points of one, or more aggressive and thrashing than something like Dyer's Eve. They took, everything they'd learned up until that point, the speed of Kill 'Em All, the classical influences and stings of Ride the Lightning, the multiple time signatures. There we go. Yeah. Time signatures. Master of Puppets, and they melded it all into a beautiful piece of art. And I'm going to take a bullet out of the chamber right now, because the biggest criticism people have is the mix. Obviously, the bass is hard to discern. A lot of people go so far as saying there's no bass in this.
Right.
I would disagree. I don't know about you. Can you hear it at all? Or?
It's funny. I was listening to it on Spotify a little bit this morning to prepare for this, and I noticed it was a little bit like, I remember interviewing Robert for Death Magnetic. It was, and we had this little side discussion about how you hear the essence of bass, but you don't hear the articulation of bass. And on that one, I noticed on Spotify, you could definitely hear the essence of bass. You could hear a bassiness, but you definitely could not hear the picking of it. And when that happens, that's a bad sign. But yes, of course, this album has it definitely got a lot of abuse for that. And credit to Metallica. I mean, you could almost write a book on Metallica just on their productions, because they were always restlessly searching for weird, cool production sounds. And as much as I'm not a fan of Load and Reload, I think those have really cool, strange productions.
Yes.
Really, really interesting production on that. Not so much on the Black Album, and Saint Anger again is another eccentric production. And there seems to be some buzzing Redline feel to a little bit of Death Magnetic. We won't go there, but they've done some fixing on that. But yeah, I mean, that is obviously one of the main complaints. But I have some other sort of things to bring up. But before I do, what else do you like about this record?
Well, I'm gonna go and kind of answer that while addressing the mix. I love the guitar, the drums, and the vocals on this, and that is really the focal point of this album. The thing about the bass line is, a lot of the bass lines in this are just really doubles of James' rhythm guitar work, which to me is not a bad thing. James' rhythm guitar work is some of the best in all of heavy metal. Like, not just thrash metal.
Yeah.
Maybe even just all of rock. He's got some of the cleanest chugging. He's got really great melodic but aggressive riffs. And I don't think there's anything wrong with taking the new guy, Jason, and just kind of letting him fill in the sonic... palette of it to really give it a full sound. Mm-hmm. People say it sounds light and the guitars are thin, but I don't hear that. I hear that low end boom and the clearness of the guitars, and the drums are a little thin at times, but not all of them. Like the kick is got a nice slap and a nice thud to it, and you really hear that on songs like One. Mm-hmm. You know, it kills it. That's an iconic, legendary riff. And that, I'm not sure if this is the right word, motif of the triplet, you hear that all throughout the album. And that leads me to my point of what I really like about this, that makes me not mind the production so much, is like I said, this is really a piece of art. Obviously, with Cliff Burton passing and the bus accident, this was a moment of really intense emotional strife and struggle for the band. And it might not have been moral to treat Jason kind of the way they did, and to really put him in the back line and to treat him as essentially just a bass boost for the guitar. Mm-hmm. But if you kind of can step aside from that, you see that the band was in a lot of pain and a lot of suffering, because they had lost, like, Cliff was really like a leader in that band and someone who was really, really important to them. And I think you can kind of almost hear that mourning for his loss in the mix and in the songwriting, and it all comes together into this beautiful, tragic kind of mishmash that's consistent in a weird way. You know, you look at the album. The album it's all about a cracked and fractured Justice, and the mix. You know, would have been better if the bass had been more articulated, and you could actually hear more of it. Perhaps that's easy to say, but I think what's truly a testament to this album's strength is how great it sounds, even with the mix not perfect. Mm-hmm. This is an 8 million selling record. This is, proof that you can write a song that dips into classical music. There's no other way around it. Some of these articulations that they're doing are you could have heard that in the Baroque period or the classical, and then to go right into a prog metal killer like Injustice for All. Like, the title track itself it does a lot of really cool things, and it goes places, and I think it's a 9-minute track that is a journey, and I think that kind of goes through the whole album from start to finish, from production to playing, is a little flawed. Yeah, I'll give you that, but it's still a masterpiece. And I would say that once you know the context of that record, those flaws really start to become beautiful in their own respect, because they start to become a reflection of what the band was actually going through, a reflection of the internal dynamics of the band. Like, if you know a lot about Metallica, Jason Newsted, the bassist who played Cliff Burton, was kind of put through the runner. Like, they did not treat him very respectfully, but that comes through in the songs. That comes through in the band, and there's something special to be said for an album that is an honest and true depiction of what those people are feeling. And we talked about this on the Misfits, and I was on the other side of it then. I was saying I just want some easy listening pop punk, and Marco brought up the point that it's authentic, and there's something, we forget about it a lot these days because we start listening to 100 records in a month or something, and they all just start to blend in and forward. But there's something about those not quite perfect songs that still grab your attention, because it's harder to do. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they did it is, in my mind, amazing, and that's why it's my favorite album. I'll admit there might be albums that are bad. Black Album sold like 16, 20 million copies, something insane. Obviously a lot of people like it, but it's legendary that they were able to make a prog metal album with virtually, I won't say virtually no bass, but with very little bass being able to be heard, and it still sold like gangbusters, went crazy.
Yeah. It's a good point. I mean, that's a great, very articulate defense of that album, and I'm almost convinced. But but I mean, the fact of the matter is, to just give you a little pushback, or at least tell you, of course, why, and you obviously know why it would be the contrarian choice. Is that, first of all, the Black Album is a huge album, but I wouldn't say it's the favorite, album of ardent Metallica fans. I would say, if you ask them, and I have asked them because I did a book years ago called The Top 500 Heavy Metal Albums of All Time. Master of Puppets won that entire poll. Yeah. And I just put out a book called Aces High, The Top 250 Heavy Metal Songs of the 80s. Just got it last week. Master of Puppets won Greatest Song in that 80s book. So people love Master of Puppets, and to give you a little pushback, I mean, there are other reasons you call something a great album, and Master is just, it's one piece of vinyl, it's sequenced perfectly, there's no fat on it, even though it can be a bit proggy. It's got a legendary crushing production sound, very Anthraxy actually, very it's heavy on mid-range. The basses are high, the basses are mid-rangey basses. The treble is mid-rangey treble. I mean, it's just really attacking you in that midfield, right? Ride the Lightning is my favorite, but Master also is probably the one that really, I'll never forget. I mean, the idea of winning that entire poll and being the greatest heavy metal album of all time. Master of Puppets, you can't beat that. So I think this is a band where the clear choice. We talked a little before about the Black Album and how that is 16 million. It had some massive hits on it. It's a beloved album. It's easy drinking. It goes down easy. It's their British Steel essentially, right? But millions and millions of people love it, and it's a classic. But I think the ardent Metallica fans who want to challenge themselves even just a little bit will pick Master every day over. So you do have a contrarian choice. It's a great choice, and that was a great defense of it. So I thank you for that. That's actually a really you made a lot of good points about it, and it is completely a work of art.
And when we were talking about Uriah Heep, and I was kind of pushing back a little on Abominog, and you mentioned that Demons and Wizards, that's your mind's choice, but Abominog is your heart's choice. I pointed to my head when I said my heart. That's how bad the struggle is. But for me, I think it's very similar. Where in my head, of course, Master of Puppets. That's the pinnacle of the work they did with Cliff. The production is smooth. Like it's amazing that they made an album that's heavy and aggressive, but is smooth. Like it feels good on your ears because it's such a balanced and pristine production. And they had hints of the prog, like you said, but without a lot of the I don't want to call it fat, because to me
you almost did.
To me it's all the steak.
Yeah.
But I understand that not everyone has time to listen to like a 7-minute, 9-minute song. Sometimes you just want to listen to a 6-minute.
Because I'll never forget. I mean, you were surprised, or the idea that in the vinyl age, when that album came out, it was a double album.
Yeah, I got it on CD, and
which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
So I'll never be able to get that out of my head that it's a double album. So it is them just stretching out, doing whatever, not being edited, and that's another reason why forget just the mix and the bass problem, but that's another reason why people will call it a little bit flawed. That it can be a little bit meandering. Those songs might be good to bring them down a little, and I feel a little bit that way of Death Magnetic and Hardwired as well. That I've always complained, although I love those albums, they're actually two of my favorite Metallica albums. I find that it would be really cool for them to I would love to see them turn in a 55-minute 11-song album, right? That would be so cool to see again, right?
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. Like Death Magnetic and is kind of another thing where and Justice and Death Magnetic. I don't think I would like these albums as much if I didn't know about the history and the context around them. They would just be slightly different albums. But when for example, like Death Magnetic was a really big return to form, right? And then Justice was a triumph after a tragedy. I think it kind of speaks to the ways that maybe as contrarians we don't enjoy music the exact same way you might if you're just listening in the car. To us, it's all part of a story. It's all part of a history, like a tapestry, or in some ways a community. That there's more to it than just the music sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's what this is. It's
cool.
It's a death magnetic. It's
Yeah.
a justice for
Cool.
all.
Well, there you go. I mean, I thought that was a great defense of the album. Let's see what you think. Chime in on the comments. We'd love to hear from you, and of course, subscribe. That would be very cool. But there you go. That was our episode on Metallica, and thanks again, Nick, and we hope to see you again next time.